Aviv set up for us. So this is I decided to do the get rich quick talk first. So this is not going to be the consensus protocols talk. I will do that later today. Instead, I will talk about essentially three different schemes. Or I'll talk about three different schemes, but two different attacks by which you can make a bunch of money, more than your fair share. And so these two tricks involve two separate attacks, both related to the same mechanism, which is when you find a block, you don't tell other people. So this we call block withholding. And so the two variants of this are block withholding against the blockchain itself, a technique known as selfish mining, as well as a second variant due to Itai et al., which is block withholding against pools. You become a member of a pool, and when you discover a block, you don't tell the pool operator. So let's go through this, and let's see how we can make extra money we don't deserve. So I'm not going to bore you with the Nakamoto consensus. You know how this works. It's a cooperative process where people sort of discover blocks, tell other people, such that others can build on top. Easy, straightforward, and so forth. There is also this other mechanism, the heaviest, longest chain rule that has been mentioned multiple times by now. And once again, in this scenario, when you have a long fork, when you have a long blockchain, any sort of short offshoots from it are pruned. And we have to do it that way. We can't possibly respect those short chains, because if we did, people would go back and revise history. So that's where we are. And this is really the brilliant invention by Satoshi Nakamoto. So, okay, so that's what it is. And so shortly after Satoshi came by, the following thing happened. When you look at this mechanism, you can immediately see that for it to be correct, a majority of the hash power has to be correct. Right? Let me say that again. For it to be correct, a majority has to be honest. That's okay. Now the implication, most people don't understand implications. And what they do is when they hear something like this, they reverse it. They reverse it to say, when the majority is honest, the system is secure. And that's not how it works. Okay? You can't just take a P implies Q and then reverse it to Q implies P. In fact, so when we sort of came into the scene, there were a couple of folk theorems, if you will, things that people believed, things that people perpetrated, that were of the following form. The first one is the security guarantees of Nakamoto consensus hold as long as a majority honestly follows the protocol as prescribed. So you do what Satoshi says, and Bitcoin will be secure. This is what people firmly believed. Deviating from the protocol is not profitable. This is known as incentive compatibility. It means that if you don't actually do what Satoshi told you, you will lose money. It's a great property to have. It's a wonderful property for any distributed system. If your distributed system has this property, you can sleep well at night, knowing that people won't try to game you. And then the third one, again related to incentive compatibility, is that, but more subtle and goes a little deeper. It's the following. Miners' earnings are proportional to the amount of work that they do. And you want that property as well. If you don't have this property, then you'll start having dynamics. That is, miners will form alliances and shift their power to an optimal configuration. If small miners are at a disadvantage, then they should regroup and pool. If large miners are at a disadvantage, they should break themselves up. So that dynamic is important. And if the relationship is linear, then you have the best scenario. Then truthfulness is a good dynamic. That is, whatever hash power I have, I present myself to the system with my genuine hash power. I don't try to pool with you. I don't try to break myself up. So that's a property that people thought Bitcoin had. Itai et al., who's a professor at the Technion, and myself showed that all three of these assertions, all three of these folk theorems are false. They're completely wrong. Bitcoin is not incentive compatible. The security guarantees require a supermajority, not just a simple majority. And miners' earnings are not proportional. They're not linear in the size of the mining. So this essentially what we've discovered is a different strategy, not the Nakamoto strategy. So you don't do what Satoshi told you. You do something else that I'm about to show you. You do this other thing called selfish mining, and you make more money than you should at the expense of other miners in the system. And it also turns out that it creates a terrible dynamic for the system. It's a dangerous scenario that you should be aware of, and it's a dangerous scenario that we should think about and build some mechanisms, some defense mechanisms for. So let me show you how you can make money, right? Are you guys ready to get rich? Yes? Okay. So let's see how we can get rich. It's fairly straightforward. Now, it's going to be a probabilistic scheme, okay? So it's not going to be a scheme by which you are guaranteed to make money every time. It's like going to Vegas and counting cards. You change the odds in your favor. In expectation, you will come out ahead. But there are scenarios where you lose. Okay, so let me illustrate all of the scenarios, including the ones where you always win, as well as the ones where you sometimes lose. Okay, so let's take a look. There will be about 5 or 6 cases of importance. So let's take this as the tail of our blockchain, say the Genesis block, if you want, or the tail of the blockchain. And I am the selfish miner, and you guys are nice, honest folks. Okay, you guys follow the Nakamoto protocol. I will do something else. Now, just to recap, Nakamoto protocol says what? If you find a block, Eli finds a block, he says, hey guys, I found a block, I adopt it, I build on it, and when I find a block, I say, hey guys, I found a block, Maurice then takes my block, builds on it, and so on and so forth. Now, for selfish mining, we don't do that. If I'm the selfish miner, and I find a block, right here, this one, I found it, I keep it behind my back. I don't tell any of you. Okay, so that's kind of like a funny situation. The moment I have a block, a solved puzzle behind my back, I'm slightly ahead of you. I have a slight advantage over you. And I'm going to use that advantage to knock out your blocks. Okay, let's see how I do that. So I have this one block behind my back. Let me illustrate some of the easy cases first. With some probability, I will be able to build a second block on top of my already hidden private block behind my back. So I had this green guy, so let's say I have a 30% miner. I'm a 30% miner. With 0.3 probability, I find this guy. With another 0.3 probability, I find the second block on top of the one behind my back. So now I've got the second block. I keep both of them behind my back. Okay? And so on, with exponentially diminishing probabilities, I'll be able to have maybe 3 blocks behind my back, 4 blocks, and so forth. Well, let's take the case where I have 2 blocks behind my back, okay? So I've got my 2 blocks, and a scenario this is one of the easiest, simplest, most intuitive scenarios. Eli comes along and he says, hey guys, I worked really hard. I found this blue block. And this is when my strategy shines. I have these 2 blocks behind me. I see Eli's block. He worked really hard for it. I say, Eli, you worked really hard. Good for you. But it turns out I have 2 blocks right here. And by virtue of just making public my 2 blocks, I knock out and kill his work. All of the effort that he put into this, finding this block, is wasted. In essence, but the moment I had 1 block, I was ahead of him by 1 click of the protocol. By virtue of having 2 blocks, I was guaranteed to win against him. And I used that to kill him off. Yes? Absolutely. Yes? Yes, yes. Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Getting into this scenario is going to happen 0.09% of the time for a 30% miner. The rewards are, we're going to do the math. I'm not going to do any kind of, you will see it in 2 seconds. But let's sort of cover all of the scenarios. Okay, so everyone's with me on this, right? I essentially, what happened is, I was ahead of you, and you were working on a stale problem. And by using that advantage, I knocked out your block. So what else can happen for completeness? Let's see. So I make these 2 public. That knocks out the blue one. Yep, knocks it out. Eli is losing money in this game. So, okay, for completeness, I should mention this case. If I'm 3 ahead or 4 ahead or any more ahead, it should be fairly obvious what I do. When Eli reveals his block, I reveal my block. And, I reveal my block. And if Eli manages to build another one on top of the blue one, I will reveal these two. I will certainly kill it off. So if I build a lead of 2 or more, I am guaranteed to win. That's also clear, right? So now the risky scenario. There's one risky scenario. What's the risky scenario? The risky scenario lies in the setup, right? So it's hard to get into the situation where I have a lead of 2. To get to have a lead of 2, there is at least one click where I have only a lead of 1. So I had just one block behind my back, and at that moment, Eli could say, hey guys, I have a blue block. And now, what's my best outcome? If I don't do anything, for sure Eli is going to win, right? Because not for sure, but there's a great likelihood that Eli is going to win because the majority is on his side and people are going to build on blue. So the best thing I can do at this point is going to be to watch the network judiciously to see if anyone has a competing block like this. So as soon as Eli has any indication that he's got a block, I should be very vigilant. And as soon as I see it, I should toss out my block into the public. So I make this block public. And what happens next? Well, it depends. There are exactly 3 scenarios. So with some probability, about 30% or so, I'm going to build on my own block, right? With whatever my hash power is, I'm going to build. I would never build on Eli's block. I'm not stupid. So with some probability, I'll build on my own. And so that's a good case, orange on orange. Is that the one? I think that's the orange on orange one. Sorry, there's one where I build on mine. That's a good case. There's another case where Morris is here. He's a nice, honest person. And Eli discovers the block. And so what happens next depends on who Morris hears from first, okay? Based on the way the code is implemented. The nodes, to break ties, they will adopt the first block they hear of. So if I get to Morris before Eli does, then he's going to build on my block. If Eli gets to him first, he's going to build on Eli's block. So this honest guy over here could build on my block, cutting off Eli's. I get 1 reward, Eli loses, Morris gets 1. Or, of course, there's this scenario where Morris builds on Eli's, the 2 of them make a reward each, and I lose my investment. So is that thorough enough? I covered all of the potential cases. So I could lose, but I could win. And so the question is, what exactly happens and how do we analyze it? So if you build the Markov chain what happens in the system, you get a scenario kind of like this, where each of the states corresponds to how far ahead the selfish miner is. So alpha is the power of the selfish miner. The transitions are shown in arrows, and the markings on the edges correspond to probabilities. So if I have power alpha, with some probability I have a lead of 1. With another alpha probability I have a lead of 2. Another alpha, lead of 3, and so on and so forth. And then transitions in the opposite direction. This is the state where I no longer have a lead, but we have a race inside the network. And these are the 3 different cases in which the races get resolved. So that's sort of the situation, right? So just so you orient yourselves, this is the case where I have 0 lead. Everybody's on the same page. With 1 minus alpha probability, the public is finding things. When the public hears of things, or discovers blocks, and I don't have a lead, I adopt what they find. And if I develop a lead, I keep it secret. And on occasion, see if I have a lead of 2 with probability 1 minus alpha, you guys find something, I reveal what I have, and I end up making a lot of money on this particular branch.
Where's the case that you have a lead of 1,
yeah,
and then someone builds on your block rather than on the other guy's block?
Lead of 1 with probability 1 minus alpha, they discover a competing block. And so we go to this scenario where I have made public my leading private block. And so now we have a race, and that race gets resolved in one of 3 ways. I should mention this. Thank you for bringing this up. So what are the probabilities in which in which these edges are taken. Okay, so that's a good thing. So essentially, we're agnostic. We don't know with what probability Ellie has control over Morris. We just don't know. Let's call that probability gamma. Okay? So if Ellie is very well connected, he is going to have probability very, very high that he's going to influence Morris, and I will have 0 probability of influencing Morris, of getting an honest person to mine on my behalf. If I'm good, if I know what I'm doing, and I do all these tricks that Aviv just told you about, to get deep inside the network, to partition it, to slow things down for other people and so forth, then I might have the upper hand here. And so in that case, we will say that we have a high gamma. And the probability will vary between 0 and 1. Okay, so gamma of 1 means every time there's a race, the honest folks adopt my block in that race. A gamma of 0 means every time there's a race, I lose, guaranteed to lose. Okay? And I'm going to show you numbers for all sorts of gamma, all the way from 0 to 1. Okay? So, yes, Eli.
Essentially, you want to say, summarize in my mind what you're saying.
Sure.
If I have a block, okay, it may be profitable to me not to reveal it and actually prepare for the next, spend my time preparing for the next block.
Yes.
And if I hear somebody wait until, if I was good and I knew this guy is finished his block and he's going to publish it, I published immediately before him.
Exactly.
Disable it, and I already have an advantage that I worked on the next block.
Exactly.
And I can accumulate.
Well, okay, almost exactly. Be careful here that mining is a memoryless activity. So the fact that I did some work doesn't confer any lead to me. So that's not where I get the advantage from, but I do get the advantage from the following thing. If I know that you are ready with a block, but I jump ahead of you by epsilon time, then I get to have the benefit of all of the other honest miners working on my behalf. That's where I get the benefit from.
This I would have got without waiting also. So what is my incentive to delay?
If you delay?
My incentive to delay is to work on the next block.
No, it's to be able to knock out the competition, not to get a lead.
But you knock it out by publishing the moment you got it.
Okay, there is a subtlety here, so I will stick to my guns. And the subtlety, it really stems from the following. A lot of people think of mining as an activity in which you make progress towards the next block. Mining is not such an activity. It's memoryless. The time to next block from at any point in time is always 10 minutes. So it's not like you're making progress. That is not where the benefit is coming from. The benefit really comes from having prepared, getting into those nice cases where you have multiple blocks behind you and knocking out the competition's blocks. The blockchain would normally have been a few Ellies, a few Güns, a few Morris, a few Lubas, and so forth. But if I'm selfish, it's going to have more Güns and a lot more orphans. Your blocks will be discarded. And then I have more of the relative percentage of the blocks.
The memoryless property.
Okay.
You are right that it's memoryless, but when we talk about computing power is not just how much CPU I have, but how much time I have. So if I gain in the time, although I didn't succeed, my probability of getting the second is higher by delay, my probability, because I now have more power because I have more time. No,
absolutely not, and then this is important, Eli. So let's take the following scenario. Suppose you discover a block, okay, and it seems so. The moment you discover that block, your expected time to discover the next block, suppose you're the sole miner, okay, is 10 minutes. Suppose 5 minutes passes and you haven't found a block. Your expected time is still 10 minutes. You did not gain anything in those 5 minutes. You didn't get ahead by virtue of working longer.
I flipped a coin and I didn't win, but I had some probability of winning.
Okay, all right. So this is one of the subtleties, and I'll talk to you guys about. I'll have a slide about everything that transpired after this whole selfish mining thing was made public. If you don't mind, we don't have a big fundamental disagreement. If you want to think of it that way, you can. it's incorrect. so I don't know what to say about it. But it's not going to be too germane to the discussion at the moment. So this is our Markov model, and I think people can see how it proceeds, and we can do some high school math to figure out what the probabilities are of each transition and how much money you make on each transition. This is the transition that gives you 2 block rewards. This is the transition, one of these is the transition that gives you 1, another one gives you 2, one of them gives you 0, blah, blah, blah. You do the whole math, and then you have a simple analytical equation that gives you exactly how much reward you can be expected to have when you obey the selfish mining strategy. Okay, so it's a closed form equation, and so let me plot the equation for you, because the equation it's kind of hard to get anything out of it if you just stare at it. Yeah.
Is this taking into account the behavior of the other miners in terms of selfish?
No, it is not. We're assuming that everybody else is honest. So I'll talk about that later on. Let's for the moment assume that the world is exactly as it was in 2014 when we came along. Everybody is dutifully obeying Nakamoto. And now you could be the lone wolf in a flock of sheep and see how much money you make by being the wolf. Yes? What happened? Oh, sorry, yes.
When you're saying that the process of mining is memoryless, when I'm the miner, I still remember which values of nonce I have already tried, and I won't try them once more. So this is a memory. How does this...
It's so big that it doesn't matter, right? So this is a space of 2 to the 256. Suppose you wanted to remember exactly where you've been, it's just 2 to the 256 is a very, very, very large number.
So this not making progress notion is based on the assuming that 1 over 2 to the 256 is 0, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay. Which it essentially is, right? So there are probabilities in the world. So, there probably is a probability that, there's Brownian motion in the air right now, and the nitrogen and oxygen molecules are colliding with each other. There is a probability that all the oxygen will go over there and we'll just die over here. Like we don't worry about that. All right, let me show you the benefits. Yeah. Okay. Well, yes, expectations of rewards. The probabilities of each cases and the reward for each case. That's the reward for, I think this is the reward for the case where I discover something, you discover something, and then the chances of the honest folks building on me. Yeah.
So how come the long-term limited numbers? I mean, according to your strategy, it might be the case that you not reveal your block, and then just miss your opportunity to post the block.
Yeah. So there should be no negative numbers. There's this whole issue of negative gamma. Who here has heard of negative gamma? Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. There are 2 equations here. One is the earnings by the honest people, and then there is the earnings by you. Does that make sense? That's why there is no negative numbers. So there's them, and it's both positive, right? So they will make some money under some circumstances. I'll make some money under some circumstances. Then we take the ratio. 2 different expectations. 2 different expectations. Honest and selfish.
Strictly earnings, no losses.
Yeah, earnings, no losses. Yes, Drew.
How does this change if you have a non-zero cost of mining?
The cost of mining is not here at all. We're looking solely at earnings. Yep.
Sorry to bring up the negative gamma, but
Let's talk about gamma in a second. Can you bring it up in 3 slides? Okay, so I apologize, but let's make some progress so everybody's on the same page with me, and I'll tell everyone the silly story of negative gamma. Okay, so here's what happens with selfish mining. This is a graph of earnings. Okay, so on the x-axis we have pool size. This is the resources of the attacker, and we have it going from 0 to 50%. Okay, and then we have on the y-axis we have the earnings. So the earnings. 50% of total, right? So if you, this line is the amount of money that you should make, or you will make, if you follow Nakamoto as he told you to behave. So 10%, you act honestly, you make 10% of the rewards. 50%, you make 50% of the rewards. Now, let's look at what happens when gamma is 0. This is the case where every time I get into this tricky situation, head-to-head race with an honest, nice person like Ellie here, I lose, okay? Like every single time I lose. There is no advantage whatsoever. I am guaranteed to lose these cases. Even in that scenario, selfish mining pays off if I am large enough. If I have more than 33% of the hash power, selfish mining is a net win for me. And this net win goes up asymptotically towards 100% of the rewards. So if I'm 49.9%, even though I'm not quite the majority, I collect 100% of the rewards in the system. That's kind of interesting, right? Essentially, I'm knocking out my competition so much that I'm sweeping up the field, not allowing him to insert any blocks into the blockchain. And so you can ask, well, okay, that's interesting. And then we just heard from Aviv about all the network level tricks we can play. What if we get on this team, not just Gün, but also Aviv and his collaborators? How far could we push this? What if gamma is 1? Well, if gamma is 1, this is the curve. There is no minimum. The minimum is 0. So whatever size you might be at, selfish mining is a net win for you. Okay? Pays to be selfish from any starting point, and you always make more money than the competition. Is there a question? Yes?
I forgot in which direction gamma goes.
Gamma, 1 is I win, 0, I win every time, 0 is I lose every time, I being the selfish person. So gamma 1 is this very good outcome for me. I could be 10% and make about 11.5% of the rewards. Okay? So, yes?
Because 100% of the blocks are yours, basically, decide what goes on.
It's not, no, you're not doing a Finney attack in conjunction. So it does mean that you control almost everything that goes on the blockchain, but if you also try to do a Finney attack at the same time, you might actually have to take a cut. So that's not quite there. Maybe it's possible. Maybe you take advantage of the nice, honest guy. Maybe the cut isn't so high. But it doesn't necessarily translate to double spends. Double spends are an orthogonal axis. Yeah. The what?
After how many blocks?
Good question. So everything over here is assuming that we have gone through selfish mining sufficiently that the protocol has adjusted the interblock interval to the new difficulty. Now, imagine what happens. So if I have some hash power and Eli has some hash power, together we have sum total. And if we were cooperative, that would be, the difficulty would adjust to the sum. But if I go selfish on him, then it's a different scenario. Then we actually effectively have reduced the hash rate of the network. So initially, when I go selfish, the distance between blocks will be longer, right? I was honest before, now I'm selfish. The blocks will be more sparse. And I won't make any money until the first difficulty adjustment. So, good question. I'll talk about that later on. Yes, negative gamma, do you want to bring that up? Or? Sure.
What I wanted to say is that if you calculate it, depending on how you estimate the miner cost, you could see that in the first period until the recalibration, it could be at a loss.
It could, yeah, you could take some losses during the first phase.
This explains why you don't see as much selfish mining.
Yeah, let's talk about that later on. That's a good point. Yes, until the difficulty adjustment, you might be incurring some losses. And I have more to say about difficulty adjustment. Keep in mind that the world isn't just Bitcoin. So Bitcoin adjusts every 2 weeks, and that's a very long time. But Bitcoin Cash adjusts on every block, Monero on every block. There are a bunch of different coins, Ethereum every block. So the difficulty adjustment happens quite quickly. Yes?
This holds when you are a minority working against an honest majority.
Yeah.
But what happens if you have two one-third competitors?
Bad things happen. They start competing with each other. I'll talk about that in a second. Okay? It's a good question. And so let's worry about that. But before I talk about that, let me actually show you one additional graph, one additional line here, which is going to be important. This is the gamma equals half line. So when it's the case that when there is a race, I win them with 50% likelihood, this is the resulting benefits curve. And it says that selfish mining does not pay off if the attacker has less than a quarter of the hash power. Okay? So this is a nice thing to keep in mind because one of our fixes is going to involve forcing the system to adopt the green curve and thereby giving everybody this guarantee that their system is safe from selfish mining as long as none of the mining pools are over 25%. Yes?
Do you have an analytic formula for the crossing as a function of gamma?
No, no, we don't. That would be cool, but we don't have one. Yeah. Yes, please.
You're talking about the relative revenue here. Do you actually make?
It should say pool revenue, like this one says pool revenue. It's not relative.
But you're saying you get a bigger piece of the pie, but you're not saying you get a bigger, that the pie is bigger.
Pi is going to be the same because this is after difficulty adjustment.
Pi is fixed.
The pi is fixed, yeah. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about implications. So this gamma, okay, what is gamma in practice? I think you heard an excellent presentation on how you can get gamma to be fairly high for you. You can fracture the network, meaning you control everything that people see. So if you are as savvy as Aviv and friends, then life is great for you. And in fact, so this is a propagation graph for blocks at the time that we did this research about what was it? The average network participant had 13 seconds to see a block, okay? And 95 percentile of the network took about 40 seconds to see the block. So if I'm going to go selfish, I know I'm going to go selfish, I will find the nodes in the network who consistently discover blocks. I will buddy up to them as closely as possible. If they're open mining pools, I will infiltrate them, and I will know immediately when they discover blocks. And I can start pushing my own block very, very quickly, and my competition is taking somewhere around like in the order of many, many seconds to propagate blocks. So it seems like this is actually not a bad game to play. This is a winnable game. Gamma could be fairly high. Yes? Yeah, you'd make your own blocks very small, right, to compete better with the guys who are mining big blocks. Okay, the other thing that I want to draw your attention to is the shape of these curves. Just take a look at this. Okay, so let's take the blue curve. Okay, suppose I am a 10% miner and I could go selfish and make let's say 11%. And suppose you are a 10% miner and you could go selfish, and in a world where you're the only selfish person, you would make 11%. If you compete with me, we're going to start knocking each other out. We will both suffer. But, you would look at me, I'd look at you, you're like, hey, you seem pretty smart. You want to go selfish? I want to go selfish. Let's join forces. And if we join forces, we go to this location, and we get a bonus. We go from, 11% for 10 to 23% for 20. So we got what we would have gotten independently plus an extra, and so on and so forth, such that there's a dynamic towards ever-increasing pool sizes. This is absolutely horrible. So Bitcoin has built into it this weird mechanism where once there is an emergent selfish miner who's competitive, who's making money, then it's in your best interest. You'd be a fool not to join forces with him. He's going to be making all the money in the world. Of course you want to go into his camp. Yes? Yeah.
Looking at this, it seems pretty ridiculous now with the fast block relay networks. I think now block propagation times is on the order of 1 second, maybe?
It should be much faster.
And even faster. So does this prevent this attack? It's to some extent providing a more level playing field for everybody regarding propagation time.
Most definitely does not prevent the attack because you can see that even when gamma is 0, I still win with selfish mining.
I mean, not
so fast.
Kind of real world mitigation.
It mitigates, it could mitigate, yes, fast block relay networks mitigate selfish mining attacks for small selfish miners. So we worked on building self-relay networks, and they're a good thing to have for any coin. Yeah?
Even also Bitcoin has this mining in general, this drift towards centralization because
yeah.
of the expectation of payoff.
Yep.
Very big variance.
Yes. Yes, it does. So say again? So
because of the big, word in English, sorry, but like the expectation of payoff can be on like day to like 30
right.
So
Right, people pool resources because mining alone with a tiny little mining rig has payoff. It's going to take you 7 years to find a block, right? So that's very high variance. It might take you one month. It might take you 14 years. You know, that's a long time. But if we pool resources and split, because every month then one of us will find a block, we are better off. So Bitcoin has in it this inherent drive towards bigger and bigger pools. If I have time, I want to tell you about the second portion of this talk. It's going to be short. Shows another counterintuitive result about pools and what can happen in pools. So let's not jump too far ahead. So you guys can see that there's a big bad problem with selfish mining and the dynamics it introduces. And so it creates this dynamic where people want to coalesce their resources all the way to the 50% bound, and it's going to be you know, it's a bad world if you are hitting the 50% boundary. Now, at the time we did the work, the world looked like this. There was one entity that could have gone selfish unilaterally. He was bigger than 33%. Ghash was at the time. And so some of you might be tempted, might be tempted to say, nobody would do that. That would be against their best interest. Well, these are the very same guys that engaged in double spend attacks against Satoshi Dice. Okay, so these miners have already attacked the system, have already attacked certain selected merchants. So people do engage in these kinds of things. This is a bad dynamic. So the world is a little better. This was a more recent division. I think ever since that work, the miners have sort of kept social tabs on each other, and we haven't seen runaway ginormous pools, at least in Bitcoin. Okay, so selfish mining is counterintuitive. Okay, it's kind of weird. It's weird because you're not doing something, and you're making more money by not doing something, right? You would have normally just shared what you found, and now you're not doing that, and suddenly you're making money. It's like every field has some results like this, right? In economics, there is the theory of competitive advantage. It's very confusing. In debt, again, in economics, there are a couple of other things. People have the budget, whatever, I can get into this. There are a couple of common pitfalls that people fall into, and selfish mining is one of them. Ever since we did this work, we've been besieged by a set of people who believe that this is all hokey stuff, right? So even like last week, Craig Wright was calling me a pseudoscientist, a fraud, and blah blah blah. The invective is really, really harsh, and he believes that gamma is negative. Okay, so gamma is the probability with which an honest person adopts your block. Okay, so probability it can only be 0 to 1. I mean, the worst thing that they can do is they don't take your stuff, right? So the other way to say it is it's the amount of hash power that adopts your block divided by total hash power. So positive value divided by positive value. So he thinks it can be negative. And it was actually hilarious. He said, well, he mentioned some physics professor's book and said, well, negative binomial distributions can happen, blah, blah, blah. That fellow then jumped into the conversation, and he said, well, whenever negative probabilities creep up into physical topics, they are there to patch up bogus theories. And so completely destroyed this guy. But anyways, say again?
Who's Craig Wright?
Craig Wright is this guy who claims to be Satoshi. He's a con man. He also started a coin called Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, BSV. And it's worth, I don't know how much it's worth, probably a few billion at the moment. So so it's really funny. One of the funniest parts that happened here is once we published the paper, nobody believed us, and they crowdfunded a simulator, and I think it was 10 Bitcoin got placed into a crowdfund. Itai turned to me and he was like, "Well, we have the simulator. Why don't we enter the community?" Simulation contest. Anyway, so we were like, no, let them do their own thing. Of course, people have written many simulators for this. Obviously, all of them confirms exactly that graph that I showed you, and it is real. You can also run your own simulations and so forth. So we hear a lot of things of the kind. No rational miner would do that. It would be against their rational self-interest. Why would you attack your own coin? Well, we've seen attacks against coins, right? Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision just went at each other's throats. We had one of the first hash wars. In general, it's true that the miners have been quite compliant, but they need not be compliant. So, and there are all sorts of things that are not modeled in the game, right? So there is this game of collecting coins, but there is another game of the actual world. People could pay you to do bad things, and a miner could be incentivized out of game. We've gotten the feedback that miners are miners would detect if a pool was selfishly mining, and they would leave that pool. Well, it turns out that miners lack the ability to detect malfeasance by pool operators. This just happened recently on attacks on Bitcoin Gold, where somebody attacked BTG, and the participants in the game, the people who were lending their hash power, had no idea that their hash power was being used to attack a coin. So then, of course, there is we would detect it, and we would counterattack. Well, it turns out it's very hard to detect. Okay? Why is it hard to detect? Because the orphans that are lost, Eli's nice blocks, they are not propagated inside the network. Nobody gets to know. It's very difficult to get an accurate count of the orphans inside the network like Bitcoin. Timing of block arrivals does yield some clues. So perhaps statistically, you would be able to detect that selfish mining might be taking place. But even that is hard, especially hard in coins like Bitcoin Cash, where large miners come in and go, and the network timing actually quite varies, and it's very difficult to detect. And also, suppose you did detect that selfish mining was taking place. Who would you retaliate against? It's very hard to discover exactly who's doing what, because miners, they do normally identify themselves, but they don't have to. They're anonymous entities by construction, by design. Yes?
So if it's rational to be selfish mining, what happens if there's 100% of the network selfish mining? Just liveness is lost?
Liveness is lost, network becomes very, very patchy, right? So nobody actually would, suppose it's not 100%, suppose it's a little less. The network only makes progress when an honest person finds a block. Yeah, so that particular Nash equilibrium is actually pretty complicated and messy. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the difficulty adjustment, because that topic came up and it's an interesting one. So selfish mining doesn't generate hash power out of the blue. It works by knocking out the competitors, and the economic benefits only accrue after the system has had a chance to adjust the difficulty. So that takes 2 weeks for Bitcoin. So that is true. It might seem as if it takes a while for selfish mining to pay off. You'd have to selfishly mine for 2 weeks to just get set up, and then selfishly mine some more to reap the benefits. But it turns out that there are two things in your favor. One, in Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Satoshi Vision, in Ethereum, in Monero. This is particularly good because the miners are not identified at all. And a bunch of other coins, the difficulty adjustment is continuous. There is no setup phase. As soon as you start selfishly mining, it starts paying off for you. And the second part is, this is an upcoming paper that we're just working on. You can do what we call covert selfish mining. You don't have to engage in a sort of a sustained siege-style selfish mining attack to benefit. If I'm just a normal miner, but on occasion I knock out a couple of your blocks, I still benefit. I benefit by lowering the difficulty in the next phase. So that's an interesting thing. So there are a bunch of people who keep repeating things like selfish mining only pays off after a difficulty adjustment. That actually turns out to be technically false. Even without the difficulty adjustment, even without any selfish mining post-difficulty adjustment, you get to make benefits. Yeah?
Could it also be possible that, let's say I'm a third of the mining power. For the first 2 weeks, I just shut off my machines. I don't get blocked, so I lose some money, but I also don't pay for electricity.
Yeah.
So maybe I don't lose as much.
Yeah.
Now, when I turn them back on, difficulty is lower. I start initially with selfish mining, and so maybe I'm at the point where I knock out the difficulty change already happened.
That's right.
It is easier to do this thing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's a good idea of you.
I don't have to do the attack for 2 weeks.
You and I should just start a mining company.
Nobody else would like us, though.
That's right. Okay, yes?
Explain why it's only beneficial after the
So in Bitcoin, right? So there's a particular difficulty level. Suppose I've been in the system forever, and Ellie has been in the system forever, and the difficulty has adjusted to our collective hash power. If I start mining selfishly, I am knocking out Ellie's blocks, correct? But the sum total of blocks I will have in a particular period isn't changing. It is whatever it is based on the last level of difficulty. Yep, you got it. Okay, so what are the defenses? So there's an easy defense for selfish mining below this 25% cutoff, which is if we could ensure that gamma is half, then at least we could clear out any selfish miners below this level. And how do we do that? Well, one easy way to do this is to propagate all blocks, all of them, at all times. And then when you see a competing block race, then what you should adopt is you just pick one of the two forks in some equal fashion. The best way to do this is you take the hash of the concatenation of block AB versus block BA. That gives you essentially a 50-50 coin toss, and you adopt one of the two blocks. And that ensures that these miners are not going to get anything. So it's simple, it's backwards compatible, you lose nothing. Keep in mind, of course, that beyond 33%, I don't know of anything that we can do other than make the protocol much, much more complex by introducing other techniques that my colleagues have found. Elaine Shi and others have this thing called fruit chains that helps. Yeah? No, because then I would lie.
But you would have to lie accurately when you do the proof of work.
Yeah, but people would lie. And then now...
If you have a chain of like 2, you can't lie about the first block because you already mined the top of it.
Correct. You couldn't mine about that one, but typically
not even the first one, because you already produced it, you signed the thing with a particular timestamp, you can't lie about it.
Yes, but the problem would end up happening at the... so you're trying to get gamma high for the case where it's one-on-one. So it's you versus me, and your block's going to have some accurate timestamp in it. I will always put something in it that's just 1 nanosecond above whatever the previous block was.
You already mined so if you were the selfish miner, you already mined the block. You have the timestamp in it.
When I'm mining that selfish block, I put a fake timestamp in it. So that will mess up the clock, actually.
But that's true, but it won't be as accurate as mine, because you have to put it in there before you succeed in mining.
It'll be further back, more back in time than yours.
Back in time, yes, but not closer to now.
Correct. It'll be more back in time, and that's not good.
My suggestion is take the one that's closest.
Oh, take the one that's closest to now. Oh, I got it. Sorry. I was being daft. It took a while to understand. I thought you were suggesting take the earlier one. Take the one closest to now. That's an interesting one. It might work. I don't know. I haven't thought about it, but it might work. It's not a bad idea.
That's problematic, actually.
Uh-huh.
Let's say somebody released a block, and I mine another one, and I decide to throw him out. So I fork the chain, and I put a newer timestamp. I send it when I succeed in mining, people will look at both blocks.
Yeah.
Mine will be newer. I just did a
Right.
mining attack with one block against one block.
Exactly. This is a post-facto attack. I see your block, and then I try to knock it out. Thank you, Aviv. Well, I'm telling you, we should start this company. Okay, so I want to go ahead, and you guys want to eat, and I have more stuff, more fun stuff. So do you mind if I go for like 5 more minutes, and I'll show you a couple more tricks? They're kind of cool. Okay, so So I'm really worried. So this got us really worried about the size of pools. We don't want pools to get big, right? We're in this game because these systems are decentralized, and we shouldn't really get these runaway pools. Selfish mining leads to a runaway pool, and it's a terrible outcome. So how can we make pools sort of not grow forever and ever? Pools, like mining is an embarrassingly parallel activity. As a mining pool operator, I have an incentive to amass as many of you nice people as possible, and then I give you work, and then we discover things, and then my pool gets bigger and so forth. Well, one thing we can do is we could force that everybody in the pool unilaterally, unconditionally trusts, not that way. We force that the pool operator unilaterally, unconditionally trusts everybody in his pool. if we could set that up, then there would be incentives or there would be some pressure against me when I go to enroll everybody. So Gal, for example, comes up. He wants to join my pool. I have to now worry that he could steal my money. And then I have to say, well, I don't know about these IOTA guys. They seem nice, but maybe he'll steal my money. Maybe I don't want him in my pool. And to this end, a couple of different people have suggested some really complicated cryptographic tricks. But we suggested something really, really simple. It's called two-phase proof of work, or 2p-PAL. And the key idea is fairly straightforward. So in normal Bitcoin, you simply have to find a hash, right? So I just outsource I'm the pool operator. You guys are pool participants. I give you a crypto puzzle to solve, and then you guys give me a solution. Instead, what we do is we change it so that there are two phases. So I give out a puzzle to solve. You guys give me partial solutions. And so far so good. So we have this big embarrassingly parallel section to this. Then, of the partial solutions, the winning block must not only have a good hash with a good nonce, but the result of signing the nonce with the Coinbase key must yield a signature with a low value. Does that make sense? So there are two different crypto puzzles being employed. In one crypto puzzle, we have an embarrassingly parallel process whereby everybody discovers a nonce. In the second crypto puzzle, you have to have the private key. So to compute a winning solution to the second puzzle, you have to possess the Coinbase key. And with the Coinbase key, you can steal all of the winnings from the pool itself. So as a pool operator, I'm going to be quite reticent when Aviv shows up. That's a very, he's a devious guy, and I wouldn't really want him in my pool because he's going to take my Coinbase key and I'll never see my money again. Okay, so there's one final thing that I want to, yes?
For terminology, Coinbase key is something...
Oh, Coinbase key is the very first transaction in the block that says that by virtue of creating this block, you get a block reward. That reward goes to the Coinbase transaction. There's a key there that is possessed by the miner himself or the mining pool operator himself. Okay, okay, I know you want to go to lunch, so give me maybe three minutes to summarize a very cool discovery by Itai. Maybe let's just sort of go very quickly go through the selfish mining implications. So a sufficiently big mining pool can unilaterally go selfish, even with gamma equals 0, and still make more money. So if you have 33% of the hash power, you can win. If you achieve high gamma, then it pays to mine selfishly at even smaller percentages. So that 51% number that you hear, yes, that's there, but there's a second number, 33%, that you should be aware of. If you look at a coin and there is a miner that's larger than 33%, you should stay away from this. Two selfish miners will make more money by combining forces, so you have to be very careful about that. There is fixes for selfish mining, but the fix only works for small selfish miners, not for larger ones. There is an actual fundamental fix for selfish mining, but it's actually a very complicated protocol. So I want to show you one other counterintuitive result, and it's going to take maybe 3 minutes. And it has everything to do with these pools. Okay, so this is how pools worked back in when these slides were made. Okay, so you guys understand, of course, how the blockchain works, right? The blockchain essentially presents to you a crypto puzzle to solve. It gives you a tail, and then you build on that tail. So this is the tail it gives you. You build on that tail. You come up with a fitting crypto puzzle. You send it back to the network, and the network rewards you with money. Okay, so this is the part of the process we understand. Let's maybe focus on what's happening on the left-hand side. So these are miners, and for the reasons that got mentioned before, these miners have an incentive to pool their resources. A single miner will take forever to discover a block, and so I don't want to just run it for hopelessly and fruitlessly for 7 years to get one block. What I want to do is I want to combine my forces with you. And so in a way where we say, look, if Eli ever finds a block, he pays into the Coinbase operated by me, and I'll split it, and it will pay out. And if you find a block, you also pay into the collective. If I find a block, we pay into the collective. and we divide the money that's collected in the kitty across the 5 of us who are pooled together. So far, so good? Okay. So now how do we do this? Well, we do it. So there's going to be a wire protocol that you know very well by now. And there's a pool protocol over here that got mentioned. Aviv mentioned it, Stratum over there. That isn't so clear. Let me show you how it works. It's fairly straightforward. So here's the pool operator. Here's his interaction. The blockchain gives him a puzzle. He gives back a solution, and he gets money. But what's really going on is this. So he gets the puzzle from the blockchain. He sends it out to all of his miners. His miners work. And the miners want payment. And I don't know, as the pool operator, I don't know who to pay to. Right? There are 5 of us in my pool. Did you work hard enough? Are you as good as Eli? Did you, maybe you have slow miners. Maybe you have fast miners. How should I divide up the cash that we earned? That's a big question. Well, there's a very simple solution to it. And in fact, Manny Rosenfeld did a very nice paper on this. The simplest solution is I say something like, guys, I know it's going to take you a long time to find a real block. It might take you 7 years or whatever. But there are some partial solutions you might find. It's hard to meet this difficulty, but there are lower difficulties that you will be able to reach. So on occasion, when you're trying all these solutions, it's going to take a while to find a good one, but you will find many solutions that came close but did not quite make it. When you come up with those, tell me what they are. So I will receive a whole bunch of solutions from you, or partial solutions from you, that aren't good enough to submit to the blockchain, but they're great for my accounting purposes. So I know how hard you worked, and I know how hard Eli worked. If Eli had a downtime and he was unable to send me partial solutions, he doesn't get paid. Right? So that's how this works. And on occasion, let's say you find a block, we're very happy, and we divide the proceeds among everybody else. So far, so okay. All right. So we're going to take advantage of this particular trick. So we submit this, the money comes back, and the money is divided according to the ratio of these partial solutions. Here is what Itai discovered. So imagine that you have 2 pools. This is pool number 1, pool number 2. And it would seem to me at least, and this is the blockchain that we're communicating with. Pool number 1 and pool number 2 are competing. These guys are going at each other. And to me, it seems like the best strategy that one could use is, whatever resources I've got, I just put them to use in my own pool. And whatever resources Aviva's got, he uses them in his pool. And then we go at this, and whoever comes up with a solution wins everything, and life is great. So now you're beginning to see what will happen. Okay. So here's what Itai discovered. And I'm not going to go through the math. It's quite convoluted and complex. But here's the trick. I can do this. I can take some of my hash power and peel it off of my own block, of my own pool. So, I normally would have had 30% of hash power. I cut off maybe 3% of it. Okay, so 1/10 of my power. I peel off. They're not going to work on my account anymore. I then put them into the competing pool as moles. Okay, so I send this miner over to here as a mole to operate on behalf of this miner. But I do one thing additional. When I'm operating on behalf of this particular pool, my miners send all of the partial solutions. Okay, so they partake in any benefits that this pool has. But if they ever find a block, they don't chip in. Okay? That's kind of weird. That's really, truly weird. So I thought selfish mining, after a while, selfish mining is actually kind of straightforward. This is even weirder. So what's going on? Well, you're actually kind of totally cheating the system again. How are you cheating the system? Well, you're partaking in the collective benefits of this entire big pool, but when it's your turn to pay into the pot, you don't. You discover a block on his behalf, and you completely discard it.
Why discard it, not give it to the...
Because you can't. You cannot. When you're hashing on behalf of a particular pool, the Coinbase is part of the block you're working on, and that Coinbase pays to this side. So your partial solutions have to have that Coinbase for you to get paid. So it's ingenious. Obviously, this is not going to work for any amount, right? This is going to work for a particular amount. So and it's actually a fairly small amount, but it confers you an advantage of about 3% or so. For a 30% miner, about 3% extra winnings by playing this kind of a game with a similarly sized pool. Now, this is weird. So yes, and it has a whole bunch of implications. I'm going to skip all this stuff. Detection does not work, right? You can't really, I can't just sit there and be like, is Luba really playing by the rules? Because she is giving me partial solutions. How do I know if she was really being terrible and discarding good blocks? The statistics are really hard, right? So she's going to give me a good block once in 5 years or something. And so, you know, she could just be unlucky. And so it's very hard for me to say, hey, this is an attack. This particular attack did take place, and pools were doing this to each other. And it turns out that the game theory of how pools should act is also really interesting. So if you are, if there is one open pool and you have a big pool yourself, it's in your best interest to go attack them. And you know, things that you might want to do, some of them are better than others. Like bonuses for seniority can help. If I've worked with Luba and she's given me blocks in the past, that's a good sign. But really the best sign is this. It's hard to detect. The fact that it's hard to detect means you should be reticent about inviting people into your pool. If somebody walks off the street and wants to join your pool, you shouldn't just say, yeah, come on board. You should be like, well, this guy could be attacking my pool from the inside. And that's a good thing. So I want to end on this positive note. It's a good thing because it is one of the only pressures I know in Bitcoin against the ever-increasing sizes of pools. We don't want pools getting too big, so this is one of the few mechanisms that pushes against open pools. 2p POW, if adopted, would have to be a consensus change. That too could push against large open pools. So I think that's really everything I wanted to say. So Bitcoin introduced a new consensus model, a new algorithm. It's surprisingly robust. It's very cool. It also turns out that most of the things that people said about its correctness were false. Okay, and Bitcoin changed its character over time into a game of pooled resources. And these beliefs that people held were wrong. I think we have a better characterization of Bitcoin's and Nakamoto consensus's security now. And we have a bunch of interesting mechanisms, perhaps, to push against centralization and proof-of-work coins. Yes, I'll take a few questions, then maybe we should go eat. Yes?
Any thoughts about selfish mining in other protocols? Like the way you implemented Phantom, sounds like you need to be very connected to the network, so maybe that was
Yeah, that's a great question. And so I know Aviv is keenly aware of selfish mining and has thought deeply about how to push back against it. So I will say, for example, Ethereum is based sort of loosely on some of the early work that Aviv did. And they're fairly open to selfish mining, right?
Pretty much you end up with the same fruit chain solution. And Phantom is basically doing something similar.
I see. Okay.
It's all pretty much the same solution.
I see. That's right. You have the chain quality metrics. Exactly, yeah.
Where does the number 2/3 come from?
Where does the number 2/3 comes from? I showed you that graph where for gamma equals 0, the threshold was 1/3. So that number.
2/3 honest, then what happens? Selfish mining is not profitable for any gamma.
No. Again, you're flipping the causality of an if statement. The honest proportion must be at least 2/3.
To achieve which result?
Having 2/3 honest is not sufficient to push against selfish mining, but it's necessary. How about that? Okay. Yeah.
You mentioned Ethereum. Does the introduction of uncle block rewards change the picture somehow?
It does, but its quick difficulty adjustment makes it worse. And so in the end, I believe that Ethereum is more open to selfish mining than Bitcoin is. Yeah. Yes? Yes, very much. So similar block withholding attacks will come into play. So I'll talk about Bitcoin NG this afternoon, and there's an analogous attack in Bitcoin NG, and NG had to be constructed to make it infeasible. So in NG there is no a rational attacker, a rational miner in NG will not engage in block withholding, micro block withholding. I'll talk about that this afternoon. Yes.
Why aren't just people just spy on each other all the time? They should just spy on each other.
They should, and they do actually these days. That's right.
And what kind of equilibrium does it bring? Like, to which extent does it modify the?
Yeah, that's a good question. So just so everybody's on the same page, what people really do in the mining game is everybody penetrates every other miner, and they try to discover the hash of a recent block as soon as possible. It's a little risky to take a hash you have heard and to build on it without having validated the block. But people do it. It's called spy mining. And you're essentially saying, look, I'm part of Morris's operation. He has never lied to me before about a block. It looks like he has dead beef as his next block. I will build on dead beef, even though I have no idea what's in it. Now, when you're spy mining, because you have no idea what's in the block, you can't really actually create a new useful block yourself, right? You can't put transactions in it because Morris might have actually already included them. So what do? You mine an empty block. And so on occasion, you see empty blocks on the blockchain, often in quick succession because of spy mining. People get upset about empty blocks, but they're actually good. They introduce extra security. The chain got longer by one click. It became a little harder to undo. Things got finalized. So spy mining is actually not a bad thing to have happen. So we can expand on what people do. The mining thing is actually a fairly complex game. And selfish mining complicates it even further. So if there are no more questions, maybe we can go eat. All right. Okay.